everyone. I hope you're all safe and well, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm really happy that we're joined for this session by Ellie Boogie-Smith, who's the head of digital marketing over at Social Bee, for this interactive session around Instagram. Before we get started, just a few things about the session. This is a different type of session to the one that we did last week. So this is far more interactive. So the way that we are going to run it is Ellie's going to do a fantastic introduction. So you show you some of the features, some top tips for retail, and then we're splitting the questions in the areas up into 4 parts. So things around strategy, Instagram content, engagement, and measurement. We've had a few questions already submitted, which will help us get going. But please feel free to interact with us through the chat. I can see a lot of you saying hello. Hi, Sandra from Portugal. But if you have questions, please send them through the questions tab, and that'll help us keep track of them. And then any that we don't get to, we can do some follow-ups with people to make sure they're covered. We'll also be launching some polls, so keep an eye out for those when we do get going with them. They're completely anonymous, and it's just to help Ellie guide some of the content. And lastly, feedback. When we get to the end of the session, we're going to pop in 3 poll questions and just let us know how you found this session. And as always, if you have any ideas or any suggestions for things that we can do in the future, then please let us know. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Ellie.
Thank you so much, Suze. That is really, really helpful. And as Suze said, some of you guys may have actually seen us speak before at Spring and Autumn Fair over the years, or you've been attending our webinars sort of in the last couple of weeks, or we've got some webinars moving forward as well. But if you don't know us, Social Bee are a digital marketing agency. We work around the world delivering training and also retained services for all of our clients. And we are lucky enough to have worked with amazing brands all over the world in seemingly every industry as well. And we always joke we'd be really brilliant in a pub quiz with the amount of knowledge that we have in very random industries. So today we're going to be chatting all about Instagram. So stick around at the end as we actually have a few things to hopefully make your lives easier. But for now, I want to get started with a quick video to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour around Instagram, as I know some of you may still be new to the platform and its features. So we'll just do a quick, obviously, most of you probably recognize the main feed here. This is what you pretty much see as soon as you log on. So you have a quick scroll down. These are all the people you'll be following. You'll sometimes potentially see some sponsored content in there as well. And also Instagram like to slot in some like recent stories and that kind of thing. And there's our CEO, Lindsay. I haven't liked that content, so I've just quickly liked it. And then if you go over to your profile section, this is where you can do everything with your profile. So see what you've already got on the feed, potentially edit your profile as well. So if you want to edit your bio, which I think we'll go into in just a second, this is where you would do that. So this is where you would edit your username, your profile photo, the link to your website. You'll see a lot of people often put link in bio. We'll come back to that shortly. And also just to edit your bio as well, if you have any call to actions in there. And also just to make sure you've got your page categories sorted as well. So that's really important to make sure you're classified correctly on Instagram, so they know, and the Instagram algorithm knows what kind of business you are to push your profile out to people as well. And then if you wanted to change your logo, this is also a prime opportunity to do that as well. We always make sure the logo wants to be quite centralized in that spot there. So we'll come back to logos, because I think we've got a few questions from the last session on what my logo should be. And then in the middle section there, you've got your IGTV video. So this is where you'd upload any videos that are longer than 1 minute. Instagram tends to keep you to that 1 minute. So anything longer than that goes in IGTV. And then these are all our tagged photos. So this is going to be a subject we come back to shortly as well, when we talk about how to utilize our user-generated content, and when people are tagging us, how can we use that to the best of our advantage. And then obviously you've got your feed. And then we've got stories. Highlights is also a really great thing that you can utilize to make sure that all those stories that you're going to be putting out there are kind of categorized a little bit cleanly. So if you're talking about, I know you've got a range of bathroom products, for example, you could put all your stories about your bathroom products into one highlight. Potentially you've got a living room highlight. making sure they're just all categorized quite clearly. So then on the second little drop down at the bottom there, we've got the search feed. So this is our explore feed. And this is where Instagram, based on the content that you're looking at and engaging with, this is where Instagram will suggest the best sort of videos or content that they think you'll like. So this is a really useful video because our content could potentially be appearing in these feeds. And you can see at the top there, we just visited the IG tab, IGTV tab, and the shop tab. So these are all posts that will have the IGTV tag or the shop tag. And then at the top there, it also gives you some more details around, let's look at art or let's look at food, posts around that. And these are all posts that have been identified through the algorithm that have food in them, or have artistry pieces, or have been hashtagged with those identifiers as well. So the algorithm is pretty smart in identifying those. So now we're touching on the search bar. So this is where you can find top accounts or just accounts in general if you do a quick search. So I think we're going to have a little search for made.com, easy to find. And then you've got some different accounts there. So you've got made.com James, who I can only assume works with made.com. He potentially has some really interesting content as well. Always worth just having a quick look around. And then hashtags, which we'll touch on quite a lot today, I imagine. Hashtags are always really interesting to look at. So for this one, we've got hashtag homewares. Now, for some of you, this will probably be a hashtag you use a lot. But if we look at the top there, it says that there are 1.8 million assets. That's a lot of people using that hashtags. So is that always the right hashtag to use? Or could we potentially use something like homeware store that has a lot less, 13,500 assets? It's just really sort of thinking about the right hashtags to use. And again, this is something we'll come back to at some point today, because it's one of those ones that we get asked time and time again, how many hashtags should I be using? Is there such a thing as too many? Should I just put every hashtag under the sun there and just hope for the best? So we'll try and give you some guidance around that today as well. And then lastly, we've got places. So I've just typed in Spring Fair there. And as you can see, Spring Fair have got their own sort of little tag from when we're at the NEC, from previous events. And if you are to click on that, you can see all of the people who have uploaded using that location tag. So if you have a bricks and mortar store, or if you're an event such as Spring and Autumn Fair and you want to see who else is there, this is a really, really great tool to use just to see the kind of audience that that's bringing in. If we search for Oliver Bonus, obviously we've got lots of Oliver Bonus stores across the world. So you can just pick one. I think we pick Edinburgh here. And this will show you all the activity that's going on within the Edinburgh store. So this could be employees helping upload content. This could be people visiting the store. You can get a real feel for how people are moving around and interacting with your individual branch there. And then just coming back to that main account feed. So at the top there, you've got your hamburger menu. This will bring up some settings and also account insights, which we'll come back to again later on. But the insights basically gives you a good overview of how your account is doing in terms of reach, impressions, overall growth, locations, age range, gender, all of those things we'll come back to very shortly. And within the settings as well, this is an important piece to have a look at to make sure that you're getting the right notifications, that your business account is set up, so you've got promotion payments, branded content, that kind of thing. Privacy, if you want to reduce the amount of comments or hide tags altogether, which I don't recommend, but you can have the ability to do that. Things like ads, so you can keep track of your ads and payments there as well. And lastly, if you click onto accounts, this will basically tell you the biggest thing you need to know, which is whether you've got a personal account or a business account. And if you've still got a personal account, I highly recommend changing that to the business account to get things started. So this just takes you back to the feed. And I think that's pretty much the end of this little video. So like I said, bit of a whistle-stop tour here, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of everything that Instagram has to offer. That is scratching the surface a little bit, but it does give us a good idea. So I can get my presentation back up. Ooh. Suze, are you able to help? There we go. So I'm going to start this off with a poll. So first up, I really want to know how you, as a consumer, are using content on Instagram. So think as if you were doing your own shop, you're using Instagram as you normally would in a non-business sense. So Suze, if you can bring up the poll for the guys. Do you use Instagram primarily? Are you using it with stories, or are you using the feed content? So what are you interacting most with?
So Ellie, the poll's live and it looks like it's moving. Can you see the poll as well, Ellie?
I can see the poll. I can't see the results. Do I need to vote myself?
Maybe you do.
Maybe you should. There we go. So, it's interesting. It's leaning a lot towards feed content at the moment. I thought that would be
although both is catching up.
It is. Just interesting.
Okay.
So we'll come back to that and why I asked that question shortly. There's a thing I want to talk about today called shadow banning, which is, some of you might have heard of shadow banning already. You might be suffering with it. It is a massive bone of contention for a lot of businesses using Instagram, and it's all about how the algorithm, that lovely word algorithm, how that affects what we're seeing day to day, and how people are consuming our content. So we'll come back to that. Let's get stuck in, and thank you guys all for voting on the poll. But with our content, what we want to do is almost mix it up a little bit. So it's not always about sell with your products. Try and think outside the box a little bit. So you can see the Great Frog here have used things like Spotify playlists. So they're sharing sort of more of their kind of rock and roll lifestyle that they do by sharing their music. It kind of brings a real nice personality and totally falls in line with their brand. Or you can use a bit more creative content like ASOS have utilized. They've used easy tools. I mean, this one probably looks a bit more like a Photoshop deal, but you can use very easy tools like Canva. I know from speaking with some of you before at Spring and Autumn Fair that you've used Canva before, but if you haven't, CANVA, Canva, it's a really, really useful tool. There's free versions, and for the next couple of months or so, while we're still in this very unknown situation, Canva are actually opening up all of their paid content for free. So anything around sort of COVID-19 situation, photos, that kind of thing, they're actually opening up. So it gives you a wealth of creativity to have a bit of a play with. And it's also about utilizing those people who are tagging your brands and using your brands. So it's getting that kind of, how would you say it? So that user generation, really. So utilizing the people tagging your products, getting them involved. If the content is high quality, you can feature it on your feeds and all your stories as well. Always make sure you're linking back to whoever has tagged you in the first place, so they feel a bit loved as well. So we can see Made.com have reposted Chloe Helen Miles' photo here. They've also remembered to tag their products, which we'll come to next. And you can see Chloe Helen Miles has just been engaging with the post herself in the comments as well. So people have probably been asking where certain things are from as well, and she's been interacting there, and also just left a few little hearts on the bottom there to say thanks. That's been really recognized that you guys have reposted this for me as well. And Le Creuset are doing a really great initiative at the moment where they are asking users to tag them in their cooking stories when using their products, and again featuring them on their stories. So it makes the consumer feel quite loved and noticed by a brand, and that's always really nice. It's nice to be noticed, especially by sort of the larger brands or even just the smaller ones as well. So moving on to some top tips in terms of what we can do to really up our game when we're thinking about Instagram selling. So for those of you who have an e-commerce store, this is one of the most important things that you really need to know and get set up if you have an online store. It is the Instagram shopping feature that basically links straight back to your e-commerce store, and it allows people to purchase without ever leaving the Instagram app. So massively convenient. If you are an impulse shopper like me, probably not as convenient, but very good for the brand if you can get those people in on that impulse while they're shopping and get them in. So we can see on the left-hand side, this is what the post looks like without tapping. As soon as you tap that image, it'll bring up all of the product features. So you've got 4 or 5 there that have been tagged. If you click on one of them, I think we click on the wall box here, that brings up the website view. We're still on Instagram at this point, we haven't left anywhere. And you can then view on website. There's also a little short description box as well to give people even more information before they finally view that website. Viewing the website, it won't take you out of Instagram, it'll open the website within Instagram. So you've not really left. And then you can make your purchase. So easy as that, you just click add to cart, check out, as you normally would. Mostly, most of the e-commerce mobile stores especially now have things like Apple Pay or PayPal that you can really easily just check out in almost like a one-click situation. And Instagram is still rolling out in a beta sort of phase at the moment, that one-click purchase. So it's going to be even easier soon to buy those products. So the way to get this launched is to add your e-commerce store products. What you need is a Facebook business profile, first of all, to link this all to. So you would almost create an e-commerce catalog within Facebook, and then that would link through to your Instagram profile, which again is why it's so important to have that Instagram business profile set up rather than a personal profile. It all has to link together. Remember, Instagram is owned by Facebook, so the two are going to go like that, and they have to be sort of intertwined. So next tip, utilizing the Instagram story features. Instagram stories is one of my favorite things to use. That's what I voted for in the poll. It's interesting that it's the least viewed things, but a lot of you also said that you view both. So with Instagram story, you've got so many different features you can have a play with. You've got Q&As, you've got ask a question, you've got music things, gift things. There's so much stuff to play with. There's quizzes, there's polls. There's so much that you can have a good play with to get more engagement from your audience and get to know what they really want to see. So this is something we've sort of been having a little bit of a play with our clients as well. Especially in this time, people are potentially viewing content and engaging with content in a very different way. They're probably not going to be as appreciative of that sell, sell, sell mindset, especially if there's not really been any mentions of the situation at hand. Sort of like they're going to be a bit blind to it. So what we want to do is potentially look at asking our consumers what they want to see. So this especially works if production potentially has been halted for a little while for some people, or they haven't got that in-store atmosphere that they once would have. I remember the Lush store locally to me. They had to obviously shut down, but they're still creating content with the Lush stuff that they have at home. Their employees are like using it in the bath and the sink and showing people what they've got. And they used a little poll just to measure, do people want to see that stuff at the moment? Yes or no? And people still really did want to see the behind the scenes stuff. And actually it's quite nice sort of getting an insight into the employees and the business from a kind of behind the scenes perspective. So we can see here Pendleton have run a Q&A with Amanda, who is one of their merchandise managers, and all the questions just flooded in about how do you come up with different patterns, how do you source everything, what's the process, and people love knowing that kind of thing. Another one is Anthropology Beauty, just asking about, what's your favorite relaxing product to use, what's your beauty routine, that kind of thing. And then they just sit and repost those stories because it's real people telling that brand what they like, and it can again help inform potential customer service elements of your business. It can inform product development. There's so much that we can be using when it comes to Instagram stories to really get in touch with our consumers and how they are engaging with that content. So next thing, using plugins for your e-commerce website when it comes to Instagram. So this is especially viable if you have an e-commerce website or just a hub content that you can drive people to. So the first thing I want to touch on is link in bio grids. So we mentioned that link in bio earlier on. A lot of brands still rely on sending people up to the bio, which is great. It's not so great if you just have one flat link. So if you are sending people just to your shop, and that's the ideal situation, great. But if you want to get them a bit more targeted towards a certain product or a certain category of products, then using something like Shop, Linktree, or Shorby are really, really great ways to get people to shop exactly what they want. So simply put, all this does is replicates your Instagram feed. So this is something that Nasty Girl use. So if you go to their link in their Instagram, you'll see the Like Shop link. If you click on that, it'll bring up a replica of their Instagram feed. So if we click on the lady in the bikini there, basically clicking on that will bring up that bikini in the website. So they're going straight to that product. They don't need to go looking for it as soon as they get to the shop page. You're taking them straight to there. Obviously, there's things like the shoppable buttons that will eliminate this somewhat. But again, it just helps if people want to browse, getting them to that right content, as well as, you know, things like blogs. If you're creating blogs or style edits, that kind of thing, you can post a link straight to that without them having to go and look for it. Especially when you're taking them away from a social platform, it's one of the hardest things to do to actually get them to engage with a website and keep them present. So you want to make sure that you're getting as targeted as possible when you're sending them somewhere. And then the other feature I want to just chat about is the Shop Instagram pages. So this is the Troy London website. One of the categories on their website is the Shop Instagram page. So again, this just replicates your grid with the pictures that you choose that you want on there. And this is all on the website, not on Instagram. And simply put, it just shows you all of the Instagram photos that you want to show with the products included. And if you click on one of those, so we've just clicked on the second image there, brings it up into a new window, and you can see directly what product that is on that person. Click through, buy, there we go. So it's showing you a bit more of a social look at things. And there's also, so this feature is called Snapped with 3 Ps for some reason, and walls. They're Shopify plugins. You can find plugins that do the exact same thing for WooCommerce, Magento, whichever platform you may be using at the time. And then lastly, the biggest tip I can give you probably today is to measure your success. So measurement comes in all different forms. The ones in Instagram Insights that we just looked at on the quick video, this gives you quite a good breakdown of activity and audience. So under activity, you've got things like your impressions, your follower rates, the reach that your posts are having. It's a little bit more weighted towards the vanity metrics. So vanity metrics, for those of you who don't know, are things like impressions and reach. What we want to be looking at a little bit more is things like profile visits and clicks on those links, or clicks on our shopping products, which if you scroll a little bit further down on the activity tab there, that will tell you that right at the bottom. And then audience, I think, is one of the more valuable things that Instagram Insights gives you. So this will tell you your top countries and locations by way of countries or cities or territories as well, and then age range as well. So your most engaged age range there. So you can see that this is for social bees. Our most engaged age range is between 25 and 30s, and the sort of 30s, 40s. We don't get that much of a younger audience. We don't get that much of an older audience. And the gender split, it's not too bad. It's quite even. But the most valuable thing I find is at the bottom of this list. So the followers and the times that they are most engaged. And this is the time when you want to basically target your content to. So you can see we've got hours and days. So if you split them up, you can see the top hours that people are actively engaged with your feed. So that's when you want to target that to, because you know that they're going to be there. And then the days, if you switch it to days, it will show you which days are most popular for your audiences. So really, really useful stuff. So now we're going to take it to the Q&A. So we're going to kind of break this up into strategy, content, engagement, and measurement. So you guys have got a bit of a focus on what to look for. And we're going to start off with strategy. But before I do that, I've got another poll for you. And that is, talking about how far in advance you plan your content. So Suze, if you can get that up for me.
Yeah, it's on its way.
Yeah.
Ellie, would you mind? We've had a few questions come through about shop. Just let me pop this poll up and then I'm going to ask you whilst people, there we go. So if everyone goes to the poll tab, you should be able to see that now. In terms of there's a question here around if you're shopping on Instagram, can that link be directed to an Amazon listing or does it have to go to a website?
Interesting one. There are ways you can do it to link to an Amazon, but it can't come straight from the shoppable link. So it has to come through that Facebook link. Facebook, again, it's sort of a bit of a trial and error. Facebook sometimes allow Amazon links. I think you have to have a verified shop to do it. Facebook sometimes don't. We've had clients where we've tried to set it up with the Amazon links and it's just completely failed. I'd say if you're pointing people to Amazon links, I'd move more towards the Linktree, like shop, link in bio feature rather than the shoppable links. So then when people are clicking through to a certain grid, they know that they're just going to go straight to Amazon to purchase the product. Yeah, I'd probably recommend it that way.
Okay, and then we've had a few people ask the same thing. A lot of people have a personal account and they have a question around whether or not it's best to how you transfer it over from a personal to a business. And also for small businesses, is it best to keep a personal account or would you recommend people definitely have the business account for Instagram?
I would always recommend the business. You get a lot more features with the business as well. The way to swap your personal to business account is just to do what we had a look at on the video. When you get to your settings, there should be at the bottom of your settings an option in your account settings to change it to a business profile. This won't erase any of your personal stuff, so any engagement that you've had prior, it will all just be migrated over. So you won't lose anything. It will just change it to a business shop, and then you'll get the options to put in your website address, phone numbers, all of those things that help that checkout process for a consumer.
Right, and then one last one on the shopping, because I've seen it come through on the chat and also it came through in the questions. So around how do you pay for Instagram shopping? What are the chargeable features? Is it free? I'm guessing it's not.
No, it's Instagram shopping is indeed free. Just to have your link to your product, absolutely free. Like I said, you want to link it up to your Facebook shop as well. The bit where it does get a little expensive is obviously if you want to run ads on that, which is sometimes recommended if you want to get your product far and wide straight away, bit of a quick win. But for the actual feature itself, all free.
Great. So I'll let you move on to the strategy part then. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. And it's really interesting to note that so many of you guys have mentioned just about today. So 36% of you have mentioned you've planned your content in for today. Some of you mentioned it's tomorrow's plenty. Again, it's kind of an even split between just about today and the week ahead. We'd always recommend trying to get at least a week in ahead, if not the whole month. So something like this content calendar here, bear with me, it can look a bit intimidating when you first look at it, but it does just help you be able to plan that all in and break it down. So add things in like product and sales promotions. Maybe Wednesday, you're going to choose that day for sharing blog content. Think about things like bank holidays and school holidays as well, especially if you are, let's say you make baking wear, half terms and summer holidays, or this sort of time is really great to sort of be pushing that content out, because it's when mums and dads are going to be helping kids with baking and activities and that kind of thing. So those sort of things are really great to have in. Things like national events as well, or national holidays. You get a lot of things like National Baking Week or Bring Your Dog to Work Day, that kind of stuff. They're really easy bits of content that you can just schedule in, and it's not too much work to just sort of jump on the bandwagon a little bit of those hashtags. What I will say, keep them relevant. Obviously, if you are a bakery owner and you sell online your baking goods, National Baking Week, perfect for you guys. Jump on that bandwagon. Things like Bring Your Dog to Work Day, probably don't want a dog roaming about the bakery, so that one's probably not going to be as relevant for you. So just make sure they're relevant as you go along. So strategy questions. I think we've got a few already queued up before we move on to content.
We've got quite a few strategy questions, actually. Yeah. So actually, there's a quick question that came through on the chat that I'm just going to touch on, which is, where can you find, is there a template that you would recommend for people who are setting up their digital strategy? I know you've got one on screen.
Yes, I mean, we do actually have a version of this strategy that comes with this content calendar. So if it's something that you potentially want to have a look at, we do have some offers on that at the end of this webinar. So like I said, I've got some freebies for you to hopefully make your lives easier. And there's a few things on there on offer at the moment from Social Bee that we can hopefully help you with. So we'd always recommend sort of trying to template it out, like I said, by the months, even if you're creating your own, just using a template like this that covers, you know, June, July, August, even if it's that 3-month period, that's enough to just get you going. You don't have to do it by the day either. We find sometimes, as this example shows, just having week 1, week 2, week 3, rather than, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, helps to just pull it apart a little bit as well.
Okay, so I think one of the questions that came through is, would you recommend using one of these templates would be a good start to actually get people going on their content strategy? Absolutely.
You know, I think the biggest thing with posting on the day is it can be very, very, you know, reactive, and it's what we want to be is proactive. With social media, that reactive stuff absolutely plays its part, and sometimes that will be a factor. No matter how much you plan that content in, there's always going to be something, you know, you can potentially get a piece of PR or something that you want to put out there straight away. But as proactive as you can be in planning, these templates really do help that. It might take you quite a lot more time to just get that all planned in the first instance, but once you've got that in and you're using scheduling tools, so scheduling tools I should probably just touch on. There's things like Hootsuite, Buffer, Sprout Social, TweetDeck. Those are sort of probably the big 4, each of them with their own free accounts as well, before you can move to paid. Those are really what I'd start with. So getting that template sorted, getting your content scheduled in, and it will just leave you free for just so much more room for things like engaging on social media, taking the time to find followers.
Cool. And on that, you've mentioned the magic word scheduling. So there's a few questions. I've got a 2-parter. The first one is about rhythm. So would you recommend, if people can only post 2 or 3 days, for them to post on the same days, or to vary it as much as they can?
To vary it, definitely to vary it, yeah. Otherwise, I think people become too reliant on the fact that you post on one particular day. And also the way the algorithm works, as we touched on before, it's always looking for people to be engaged with your content. So if people are only engaged 1 time of the week, it's not enough for Instagram to see that as good, relevant engagement. So it won't prioritize you as high up on the algorithm. Whereas if you're posting, you know, even if it's 2 times a week, but you're posting every Tuesday and Thursday, you know, at least you're keeping it on different days to kind of give some variety. People often ask us, you know, how often should I post? And it's all about how much content you actually have, but also absolutely quality over quantity every time. You don't just want to be pushing stuff out for the sake of it. Make sure your post has a purpose behind it. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get people to sell? That's fine. But are you trying to also answer a question that the consumers may have, or just provide some relevant info?
Yeah, and I think this question might segue into the content section we're about to come through, but I'm going to ask it because it kind of straddles between the two. But what would you recommend with regards to underperforming content? So if content's been posted, it's not performed, or potentially it's not had likes, would you recommend that is hidden, or leave it where it is?
I think that's a tricky one. What I would potentially do, if it's not too far in the past, I would potentially just link it to my stories. So when you're looking at your Instagram post, you should have the option of like, comment, and then there's like it looks like a little paper airplane. If you hit the paper airplane, that'll allow you to upload that post to your stories. So the people who are frequently scrolling through stories much more often, and stories do get more engagement than the main feed itself, which is why I sort of asked you guys that question at the very start. If you're posting it in stories, that's a new piece of content that people are going to see, and they can tap through to that post and hopefully go and engage. And it's especially useful, again, sort of talking on the subject of shadow banning. It's useful to just get in the practice of doing that anyway. When you post a new picture or whatever to your main feed, making sure you post that into your stories to ask people to tap through and to engage. And they're more likely to do that when they've got something, you know, they're being told what to do to tap through and like that post. And again, it just helps it get out there a lot more wider.
Right. For anybody that has sent through questions that we're not covering, we've got a lot of questions to get through over the different sections, but we will make an effort to provide answers to all of the questions that come through. But I'll let you continue on to the content side now.
Awesome. Cool. So on the content side, we've got another poll for you. So this one is more about what content do you guys create the most? Is it just your, you know, your main feed stuff like photos? Are you experimenting with IGTV, live video, that sort of thing? So once that poll is up, we'll have a quick look at that. So as a business,
it should be live.
Lovely. So as a business, what do you create the most? Live, IGTV, or stories? I myself am a big stories fan, but we've been recently experimenting with a lot of live video and IGTV, as you saw as well. So at the moment, there's not a lot of love for IGTV. That's interesting. And I know we've got I think we've got a question from last week on IGTV actually, so that might come up shortly. But
do you think that's because there's not as much awareness around IGTV as live and stories? It's a relatively new product.
Yeah, it was almost you know, not to be rude to Instagram, but it was almost a bit of a flop when it launched. You know, it was supposed to be this almost like a YouTube taker of that content. So I think, you know, people thought it was going to be a lot bigger than it was. Weirdly, it took a long time to take off. It was supposed to, as I said, lure all the YouTube content creators off the platform and start creating that content directly on Instagram. It took around like 2 years for it to actually start working. IGTV is now used more than ever, but it's still, you know, a relatively unknown portion of the website. Most notably, it has had an impact on fashion with influencers and even, you know, brands utilizing it for things like, you get things like outfit try-ons. So you see things like 5 ways to style a leather skirt, or even recently with more homeware orientated accounts like how to style your coffee table. However, I would say TikTok is also on the rise for this, and TikTok is a whole nother training session completely.
Yeah, we did have a question on that actually, which is how do you feel, where do you think TikTok could become more influential than Instagram? Is that a real threat?
Potentially. I think more people are getting a hold of TikTok now. You know, it was a very young platform, similar to how Snapchat was a few years ago. You know, it's very teenage audience orientated, but a lot more people are migrating from Instagram, especially over to TikTok. Purely, I think, because of the amount of fun features you get with it and the kind of more storytelling aspect you got to it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with TikTok, you kind of record one video and you record the next portion, then you record the next portion. So you can kind of tack together very easily your own sort of timeline with different filters and sound effects and all these fun things. So it's allowing creators to kind of get a bit more playful with the content they're putting out. And a lot of Instagram users are actually uploading their TikToks to IGTV, which I'm sure Instagram probably aren't that thrilled about, but it's just interesting how they're kind of merging the two platforms. So potentially they'll work in harmony, or, you know, TikTok. I don't think TikTok will ever take down Instagram, but it's definitely something I think Instagram are probably looking at quite carefully. Who knows, Instagram, by the end of the next couple of years, they might even own TikTok. Who knows? The power of Mark Zuckerberg.
Exactly. There are a few questions here around IGTV. I think there's a few people who aren't necessarily as aware of it as some people, but could you just give an overview of the difference between IGTV, YouTube, and which is in, and really how people can take advantage of it?
Absolutely. So IGTV is basically really there for any videos that you may have on your feed that are over 1 minute long. So on the Instagram feed, if you want it in your grid section, you have up to 1 minute to put any video you want on there, but that's your limit. So if you want to create a more kind of informational style video in the way of like YouTube tutorials, that kind of thing, Instagram TV is a really great place for that. Again, I think it finds a lot of crossover. So a lot of people who do those YouTube videos will just convert it down to be a IGTV friendly size. So that's that portrait size. rather than obviously with YouTube, you've got a landscape. So they'll usually just kind of convert that content into an IGTV digestible way. So it's hard to say, you know, there's massive differences. Obviously YouTube, you get to do an unlimited amount of hours. I think the Instagram IGTV limit is 15 minutes. So you do get quite a lot to play with there. What I would say is you probably want to, if you're going to experiment with IGTV, I'd probably cap it around the 4 or 5 minute mark. People's attention, as we know on social media, is quite short. So are they going to watch, you know, a 15-minute video when they could just sit in front of their laptop and do that on YouTube, or have YouTube playing in the background? I think people are more on board with that with YouTube. Whereas IGTV, I think because it's so, you know, you're in the Instagram platform and you're scrolling already, it's probably only going to catch your attention for a few minutes. So I'd say keep it probably less than 6 minutes if you are to have a play with that.
Right. A lot of questions are certainly in the hashtag side. Obviously, Amy last week said, I think 5 to 10 maximum, yeah. But maybe you can give some insight on that. Obviously, a best practice, what works well.
Absolutely. So with Instagram hashtags, you are limited to no more than 30. But as Amy said, our general advice is to use between 5 to 10 well-researched ones. So make sure, the biggest advice I can give you is make sure that they are relevant to your brand, and they're not overused. So for perspective, the most popular hashtag on Instagram is hashtag love. Hashtag love has 1.8 billion uses. So essentially that hashtag is almost pointless to use because you're never going to make it through that 1.8 billion noise of people using that hashtag. So I'd say stick to the ones that are relevant and well used, but they're not oversaturated. So again, when we were looking at the video example earlier, we looked at hashtag homeware, and we could see that hashtag homeware had over 1 million assets accounted to it. So is homeware something we want to use? If it's directly related and relevant to you, then yes. If it's something you're sort of tagging on because it's kind of part of your business, probably not. I try and go as relevant as you can, and just do some research on those hashtags. Like I said, you know, the hashtags tell you how many posts are using that hashtag, so you can see which ones are really oversaturated. I'd say anything over sort of 100,000 you probably want to steer clear of, unless it's very relevant to you and your products.
Okay, great. Another question. So sorry, there's a lot of questions coming through. There's a few questions with regards to the grid. Obviously, we're talking a lot around videos and stories, and that's great. But there's a few people looking for a little bit of guidance on what the grid should look like, how many times to post to the grid, and any advice you can give on that consistency.
I'd say, how many times to post? It's, again, I refer back always to that content calendar and how much content you actually have to put out there. If you only have the capacity to put 3 posts out a week, that's fine. That's going to fill your top grid. I'd say with the grid, the thing that people ask us about most is more along the lines of like, how should it look? So do I need a theme? Now, a theme is always great, again, if you have the content for it. A really easy way to kind of manipulate your content in a way is to just use tools like Canva, as we spoke about, to almost layer filters on it. So you've kind of got that uniform look, whatever photo you're putting up. So a good example of this, I'm just trying to think of one, is Astrid and Miu. They are a jewelry brand, and their whole aesthetic, if you like, is very like kind of blush pinks, very neutral tones, lots of golds. So if you have a look at their Instagram page, you can see that it's very clearly all one kind of color palette. And that really works for them. It kind of really pops and looks, you know, you can kind of get what they're all about just by looking at that feed. And that's just using things like filters to kind of make those colors pop in the right way. So I try and think about what you want your theme to be, and don't try and force it. If you've got a very ethical brand and it's very sort of, you know, sustainable, you're going to want to potentially look at using those kind of earthy tones a little bit more. Whereas if you've got something like, you know, like a rock and rolly kind of brand, so we'll go back to the Great Frog, for example, they're going to be using a lot of blacks, a lot of greys, to really give that kind of grungy look. So it's all just about thinking, what does my brand fit by way of theme, and go from there. Hopefully that's a good answer.
I'm just going to ask, because I think we went through it really quickly, but I've had 4 or 5 questions on it. Could you just repeat the names of the scheduling apps? Yes,
of course. So it's Hootsuite, Buffer, Sprout Social, so as in a Brussels sprout, Sprout Social, and TweetDeck.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'm just a little bit conscious of time, so maybe we move on to the engagement questions, because I think we're going to have a few there as well. We've got a few lined up.
Excellent.
So engagement, I think this is the $1 million question. What's the best way to build an audience? And how do you increase your numbers of likes, followers, and how long will it take?
This is the one we always get asked. It's a very tricky question, because the best way to build an audience is to just take the time and find them. The easiest way to start with this, we find, is to think of similar brands to yours. And by similar brands, I don't mean similar products, I mean similar kind of styling. So again, going back to that aesthetics kind of thing, if you know your people are naturally drawn to like similar aesthetics. So if you sell similar styling items, like Oliver Bonus, for example, then see who is engaging and following Oliver Bonus, and then give them a follow. And they will hopefully be intrigued enough to then check out your brand, because it's a similar kind of style of products that would hopefully catch their eye. The quicker way to do this, to build your following, is obviously a little bit more expensive. And that is to set up some follower targeted ads. So you're actually putting your brand out there to encourage people to follow. Or using, in the first instance, some nano or micro influencers to get the word out initially. I would advise against going after the well-known influencers. They're likely going to cost you a lot of money, and they're quite difficult's the wrong word, but they usually have agents and things and very specific terms about what they will and won't review. But it's always just worth having a look at some nano and micro influencers who tend to have a very, very trusted audience. And nano or micro influencers are usually people with a few thousand followers, so they're not sort of up in that thousands of, but they're sort of getting started and have quite a reputable following already.
I think the key to that one is probably quality over quantity when it comes to working with those influencers.
Absolutely, yeah, and always have a contract in place as well. Again, influencers is a whole nother sort of talk itself. There's so much to it. So I'd always try and do the organic route first and try and find the type of customer that you want by using that method that we talked about first.
Great. So another question around engagement, and this is, I think is going to link back to the algorithm, but for example, you have 20,000 followers on Instagram. How many of those people get to see your content?
Again, this is where you need to consider that shadow banning and how you can work your way around this. So it is entirely based on engagement.
Ellie, sorry, could you maybe, I've had a few, just before you go on, I've had a few people all the way through every time you said it. Could you just explain what shadow banning is really simply?
Yes, sorry, I haven't really explained, have I? So shadow banning, shadow banning is basically when Instagram, it almost hides your content because it doesn't deem, it's going to sound weird, but it almost doesn't seem you worthy enough to show the content. So it usually happens to brands who are getting a pretty reasonable amount of engagement, and then suddenly it just tanks and there's no rhyme or reason for it. Usually it's because the brand is getting a lot of likes but less comments, or they're not getting enough story views, that kind of thing. So the algorithm's sitting there working its little things that it does, and it's basically seeing the engagement dropping and going, well, that's not relevant to our audiences, so I'm not going to push it out as far. So it's really very, very algorithm based. The Instagram algorithm is constantly changing, much like the Facebook business one that we all know and love. And it works exactly the same. It is very much focused on engagement rather than just pushing content out there. So with every piece of content you do, and this goes back to our first tip on mixing up your content, you want to be trying to ask people what they're doing, how they're reacting to things, trying to ask questions around each piece of content and encouraging people to talk to you, because the more you can do that, the more Instagram will hopefully favor you a little bit. But using little tips like posting your main feed posts to the story, again, can really help just push people back to your feed.
And just on that point, because again, it's probably more conversational, but are there any tips or tricks to get people to comment? Because obviously that seems quite important to get around this issue, is actually to increase that comment engagement.
The easiest way is to ask, just within your captions, or even if you add it as sort of like a piece of text to your image. So tell us what you think, that kind of thing. The easiest way is to just ask for that comment. People love sharing their opinions online. So if you just ask for that opinion, hopefully people will start getting that conversation going. There's also fun little things you can do as well, like tagging a friend, you know, when we get to go out again, what friend would you bring out, that kind of thing, or, you know, what kind of clothes are you going to dress up in when we get to go out to the bars and get again. I think most people use them on things like competitions, but it really doesn't have to be just used for competitions. You know, tagging a friend, who are you going to watch that film with next week or something like that. You know, that kind of conversational tone to just get people involved is what's going to really help.
Okay, great. Just on that point, we've just had a few other questions, and I think this goes back to your earlier point, which is around how you build that followers apart from following competitors. Can you just maybe just give a little bit more detail around how people can increase followings?
Sure. I think, again, it's about going after the relevant content, relevant followers, sorry, and the people that you know are going to be more likely to consume your brand. So again, following that first tip, is a good way to do it. Following things like blogs who post that same kind of, kind of your competitors' products as well. So influencers as well, seeing who's following the kind of influencers that you potentially one day want to target. But I'd say in the quickest terms, thinking about things like follower ads. So you don't need to spend a fortune on these, you know, just putting 50 to 100 quid behind it for a week or so should be enough to sort of drive quite a few followers. You want to be most careful with targeting here, though. So instead of just putting an ad out there to the entire United Kingdom, make sure you're targeting it down to gender, make sure you're targeting it down to the right ages of your business and who your products are aimed at, and also the interest targeting that you get as well with ads. So you can do things like, say you make cross-stitch kits and that kind of thing. You can interest target cross-stitching or different kind of DIY crafts that relate to that, cross-stitching. So you can kind of drill down really who you want to be following you. So if you're running ads, like I said, just make sure your targeting is really, really strong.
Right. And again, a little bit conscious of time because we have some questions that don't quite fit into our 4 strictures, but I think if we move on to measurement. So I think one of the key questions that's come through, and I've seen it a few times, is around what should people be measuring and how often? Sure. And if you could also maybe just take a quick step back and just recap on how people can find the measurement stats within Instagram, within Insights.
Sure thing. So within Instagram itself, what you want to do is go to your main profile. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do this along with you so I don't tell you the wrong information, but it's go to your own profile, and then you've got the little hamburger menu. Don't know if you can see, but up in the corner there, you click on that. You should get your little drop down. Hopefully you can see it. And there should be one for Insights there. And then that will bring up the grids where you can see your impressions, audience targeting, that kind of thing. In terms of what you should be measuring. Now, this kind of relates to, I guess, how much setup you've got currently. If you have an e-commerce store, you absolutely should be measuring click-throughs to that store. And Instagram Insights will tell you how many clicks you're getting on your links, or on your shopping tabs. So if you have that set up, it will tell you how many people are interacting with that and going through to the site. If you're using something like the link in bio tools, so Linktree or Like Shop, those ones, they will each have their own analytics as well. So they can tell you which ones we're getting the most visits and clicks. It's basically all about clicks. So you want people to be clicking through to your main e-commerce website as much as possible. if you don't have an e-commerce website at the moment, I would say, and potentially if you're just starting out as well, engagement metrics are what I would focus on. So thinking about your likes, comments, reposts to stories, story views, that kind of thing as well. What I would potentially, I would count it, especially if you're building up your brand. But if you're a bigger brand, I would almost avoid impressions and reach. This is what we call vanity metrics, because it tells you how far your content's going, which is great from a branding perspective, but it doesn't actually tell you what they're doing. Whereas the likes, comments, those engagements are going to be the ones that are actually telling you that people are doing something, whether that's making a like or a comment, or eventually clicking through to your site and purchasing a product. So impressions and reach. Impressions, I always have to get this the right way around. So reach is how many accounts individually it reached. Impressions is how many times it was seen. So obviously an account can see that piece of content multiple times. So your impressions are always probably going to be higher than your reach. So yeah, like I said, always go with more of the engagement metrics and click-throughs. If you have an e-commerce website, make sure Google Analytics is set up, because that's going to be the end result really, which is where you want to be measuring revenue. And if your Instagram pages or your social media efforts, whatever platform you're on, are actually resulting in end sales. And there's so much information in Google Analytics. Again, this is a whole other training session as well. But definitely try and link the two up if you haven't done so already. Google Analytics is absolutely free to set up. It will just give you a tracking code that your developers or whoever built your website will just need to install in the website. And there you go, it's all done.
You mentioned a phrase there, I'm just going to go back to it. So you mentioned vanity metrics. Could you explain what you mean by that?
So vanity metrics, they're the ones that are a bit more about, vanity metrics, we call them that because numbers like impressions and reach tend to look really good because they're usually in the thousands or hundreds of thousands because that many people are seeing it. But they're called vanity metrics because that's really what they are. They're not doing anything. They're just there to look really, really good. Vanity metrics usually are more focused on in terms of a branding exercise. So if your branding goal is to get your brand out as far as possible and get it far and wide, so that lots of people are seeing it and hopefully them following, those vanity metrics are great to report on and be paying attention to. But if your main goal is to secure e-commerce revenue, then definitely focus on the more engagement metrics. Yeah, that's probably the simplest way to describe that.
Okay, and how do you feel about tagging products on Instagram? Is it the more the merrier, or is there an approach that people should take for this?
Do you mean tagging products as in the shoppable tags?
The question's just, how do you feel about tagging products on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest? Should it always be done? So I'm assuming that is a question around shop.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. If that's your main goal, to push people through to your e-commerce website. I've seen some companies, so made.com do this quite well. If they've got like a living room feature, they won't tag every single product in it, but they'll tag the main ones that are potentially a focus for them. So if they know they need to push sales of bedside tables, they potentially won't tag their bed, but they'll tag the bedside table and the accessories around bedside tables and that kind of thing. So again, it's all down to sort of what your main product pushes are. And again, this links back to the content calendar and where we looked at the tab that said product pushes. So this is where you want to just plan that out and say, right, this week we're going to be pushing vases, and the next week we're going to be pushing water bottles or that kind of thing, just so you know you've got a bit of a theme that you can focus that around and it's not just random products. I'd say probably no more than 5 if you are going to go with a best practice rule. If you've got loads of products in one picture, try and pick out the 5 that are most valuable to you.
Okay, great. Quite a lot of questions still to get through. What I would say is, if we haven't answered your question as we go through, and we are at the hour, we're going to do a few more. Hopefully Ellie's okay with staying past the hour. But we will try and get through as many, and we'll try and get all of these answers out to you. There's been a few questions, just general Q&A and different things that didn't fit in. Do you have any recommendations for story design tools that aren't Canva? I know you name checked it before.
Yes. So there is a brilliant one. Canva is great for stories. They have a template feature for stories, so you can just go straight there. There's also an app called Unfold. So as if you're unfolding something. There is paid elements to it, but it's got some really, really pretty, clean ones. I think that's what companies like Anthropology use, and to get that sort of really clean, very design aspect led ones. And all you need to do is, it's basically a drag and drop situation for Canva and Unfold. It's all about just placing the text where you want it, pulling in images, putting in like little design flashes. So if you want like a streak of paint or something across the background, that's all stuff you can do with those two tools. They're my two favorite that I tend to use. There's lots out there as well that will play with things like video. So you can have a little bit more of a play with that, and sound effects and things, but they're the ones that most brands have typically used.
Okay, great. And just on the stories point, there's been a lot of questions around stories. Is there a best practice as to how people can put those stories together in terms of the look and feel, or would you recommend relying on those tools?
I would, again, go back to the way you want your whole feed, your whole Instagram themed. So if you're thinking about, you're going to use more earthy tones on your main feed, replicate that with your stories. So what you don't want is for your whole feed to be like really kind of earthy tone feel, and then your stories to just be like bright white, because it will just be such a disconnect. So I'd say in terms of a design element, just try and keep it quite tied in with how you're doing your main feed. But the templating options with both of those apps offer lots of different examples of how you can use those. I know Canva has one that's like a minimalist theme, so it's very sort of kind of dark colors or like bright white colors with sort of elements of like black and that kind of thing, where it looks very, very stylized. Or there's kind of ones that are more like scrapbooky. So if you've kind of got more of a kind of cottagey vibe, cottage sort of decor vibe to your business, you can use more of a scrapbook kind of theme to make it look quite cute and quirky as well. So there's lots of things on there. I definitely have a little play with the templates on each of those.
Okay, great. Just as a general comment, and I know we're past the hour, so I'm just going to let everyone know, a lot of people have found this quite advanced, and we will speak to Ellie and the Social B team about doing something that's really quite basic as to how you get going. So I'm just letting everyone know, just before people start to leave, we will follow up and try to put something together for you. I have a question around measurement. There's two that's come through that I think quite hopefully quick fire, but is there a way to see insights over a longer period rather than just weekly?
So with Instagram, unfortunately, it does limit you to that. There are some different tools out there. There's not one that we tend to use more, because we normally stick to analytics to really analyze that data. But there are some tools out there. If you search Instagram measurement analytics, that kind of thing, there will be tools that are quite reputable out there. Most of them do need a paid offer or paid element to them. Some of them will give you some free features. But a lot of them, if you want to go back further, because it's not an Instagram feature that is free, it will require you to probably pay for that. So I just be almost keeping an eye on your metrics just on a weekly basis, like every Friday, maybe just have a quick look at how the previous week has gone, note it down somewhere so that when you come to do maybe more of a like monthly view and a monthly report, you've got all the information there.
Okay, another question on Insta shopping. Could you please quickly explain what it means by connect to catalog when enabling Insta shopping? Does it mean that it needs to connect to your business Facebook page or your site?
It means to connect to your Facebook business page. So the catalog that it's referring to is all set up within Facebook Shop. So that's where you want your Facebook Business Manager to be set up, and it will just basically link the two together.
Okay, interesting one, but I think I would like to know this. Is there any way to check who's unfollowing you? So if you, for example, post a piece of content and you see maybe you've lost a few followers, is there a way to find that out?
There are apps that can do it, but they're generally a bit sketchy. You can, it's with every sort of unfollower app. What we found in the past when we've had clients using this is that it usually requires a lot of information that's tied to other profiles that it just doesn't need. And usually that will require like email addresses, then you'll find yourself getting spammed with links. So there's not really one reputable one that we've ever found that will tell you directly that hasn't been a bit sketchy. It also is quite unreliable. We've seen it in the past where it says 5 people have unfollowed you. It will show who has unfollowed you. You go to your profile and they're still there following you as if nothing had happened. So I'd always err on the side of caution with those. Again, it's what you want that information for as well, I think. Why, if someone's unfollowed you, why do you need to know who has unfollowed you? Because just, you know, relentlessly then targeting them is probably not going to get them to come back. So yeah, I'd probably err on the side of caution with those apps. They do exist, but like I said, they're not the most reliable.
Yep. And another tools-based question here. So you, going back a few minutes, you used an example from Oliver Bonus, and you said that you could borrow their followers. Is there a tool to automatically find those users of those multiple accounts instead of doing it manually?
There is. I'd have to rack my brains because we haven't used one in a while. Again, they can be quite unreliable, those tools. Well, not unreliable, they just ask for a lot of unnecessary information from you, which you don't necessarily need to give. I would always say spend some time doing it manually anyway, because I think you'd want to have that control over who is following you rather than just, you know, blanket get all of Oliver Bonus's followers and follow them all. A lot of them probably won't be relevant. A lot of them could be even bot accounts and that don't actually exist. So you want to almost do your own research and just spend a few hours just having a look. And maybe you do this, you know, 1 hour every week or something, and it doesn't have to be like one huge exercise. You can kind of eke it out over time a little bit.
Okay, great. I'll do 2 more questions.
Sure.
I've got one from Helen. She said that Instagram is brand new to her, but how long generally does it take to get your account set up? And how long do you think it would take to start really engaging with your audiences? Is there any best practice in terms of the first one?
I'd say if you can get your Instagram set up within the day, then it's done. So again, I just spend some time, as much time as you can take out, even if it's, you know, on a weekend. I know that's not ideal, but if you can get everything together that you need. So your logo is probably the most important thing. Obviously your website links. Make sure you've got a good snappy bio that gives people an incentive to do something. That's the stuff that's you're really going to want to put on there. And then I'd almost get maybe 3 to 6 posts just out on the grid, so that then when people visit your profile, the first thing they see is almost a full grid. Obviously they won't be able to scroll, but they won't just see like 3 posts and then nothing. It'll fill up that grid enough for it to look, you know, like it's complete straight away.
So 6, would you say 6 was a good starting point to get up straight away, or 9? I know on my phone I get 9 straight away on my phone.
9. Yeah, it is 9 on there.
Sorry. And I have one last question, and we will try and recap through everything else. There's a question here around buying followers. So a lot of Instagrams or businesses, a lot of influencers or businesses will look to almost buy followers. Do you think that's a good tactic in the long term?
Absolutely not. It is one of the things that a lot of people come to us and just be like, well, can't we just buy our followers? Then we've got loads. Great. The problem you have with that is 9 times out of 10, those followers are not real. And so they are bot accounts created in, you know, far away places. There's a really cool video, Suze, that I might send you after this if you can send out to everyone, of a link farm. And this is essentially what these places that offer to buy you followers do. And it's basically a room, probably the size of my room here, full of iPhones and computers that are basically just on a loop using AI that's just following people and creating new accounts that are just, you know, spamming people. And that's the reality. It's a whole farm of, you know, businesses who do make a big living off of it, but it's not going to be any sort of use to us at all. You'll usually see the difference when someone's bought followers. A lot of the time it's usually Instagram influencers who have needed to get, I think there were some scandals with like the Love Island contestants where they bought loads and loads of followers and they had like 250,000, for example, but their posts are only getting like a few hundred likes. That's when you can really tell the discrepancy there between followers and actual engagement on their posts is when you can largely tell when people have bought those followers.
Great, Ellie. Now, I know obviously we may start to lose people. Do you want to quickly run through the goodies that you've got for people?
Absolutely, yes. So for those of you who don't know about Social Bee, our newsletter is a really, really great way to learn about what we do and also to just find out some really helpful tips. So digital marketing tips straight to your inbox. We'll ask you a few questions on sign up and it will help us really target those emails to you. So you won't just get, general marketing tips. It will be down to the T of what you guys are more interested in. So if that's social media or you want to sell internationally or, you want tips on SEO, these will be direct tips to your inbox that can really help. So if you want to visit the website, you can sign up there. We also have a brand new course here on helping small businesses. So really about looking at the online success stories that we've seen with small businesses and how to improve your digital knowledge to help your small business, especially in this time when small businesses are really feeling it. We're trying to just help those really help succeed. And then we spoke at the very start about strategy and content templates. We do have our own one that's actually on offer at the moment. So the price there is our special offer price, but this includes the content calendar and also our whole digital marketing template as well. So this will take you through basically lists of your target audiences, so you know exactly who you're targeting, the main goal of your business. So if that's to get 10 sales a month or 100 sales a month, gives you kind of that goal of what to look for, keyword breakdowns, that kind of thing. And then obviously the content calendar is within that as well. So it's a really, really fantastic deal we've got on at the moment. So if you're looking for a template to get started with, I'd definitely consider our one. Not that I'm biased or anything, but it is the one we use for our clients on a day-to-day basis. And it's so useful just to get everything in one place. And then we've also got a lot of free resources available on our website at the moment as well, including some available webinars. So we've got, if you're doing, maybe you are a wellness business who are, you sell well-being products and that kind of thing, but maybe you also do yoga in your spare time. You could run an online yoga class. That could be part of your content that you're putting out there. So a webinar like taking your training virtual can really help you to be able to do that content, knowing what you're doing in a virtual sense. Also got Boost Your Brand with user-generated content. So some of the stuff we talked about today by way of influencer marketing and how to use that user-generated content. 8 steps to a great website if you're still building your website or just want to know a bit about your own website and how it's working, if it's good. That's a really useful webinar to have a look at, and rethinking your marketing strategy as a whole as well. It's very, very useful at this time when a lot of us are having to pivot and adapt to the ongoing situation.
And just on that point, we have next week's webinar, which is going to concentrate on that content strategy, which will hopefully build upon some of the points we've had here. And added to that, we also have a session in a few weeks around user-generated content as well. So have a look and see what we've got coming up on our channel over the next few Wednesdays.
Absolutely. And any further feedback, I know you guys have got some feedback for this session, but any further feedback, if you want to take a little picture of the QR code or just copy that link below, just helps us to keep adapting these training sessions and Q&As with Spring and Autumn Fair and helping hopefully you guys get the most out of our knowledge.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ellie. I think we've covered so much ground there. As we've let people know, we'll be sending the recording out, so you'll be able to replay this video. We'll try and get through as many questions in other forms of content, so just look out for things from us over the last few weeks. And I will speak to Ellie and the guys at Social Bee and see if we can get something really basic out for a few people who got a little bit lost, some of the more advanced elements. But thank you so much. And please, as Ellie said, please do send us some feedback. It helps us make sure these sessions are as useful as possible for all of you going forward.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.